This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Security sources announced that a number of citizens were killed and others were wounded in several suicide attacks in the capital of Baghdad and other Iraqi towns. The Iraqi police also announced that 35 unidentified bodies were found in Samarra that showed signs of torture and bullet marks. Also, the multinational forces said in a report that 2 of their soldiers were killed after an explosive device detonated at a police patrol in Baghdad.
We are used to hearing ululating cries of joy at the Sadr courthouse where couples get married. Instead, young couples today were martyred when the hands of terrorism took their lives in a despicable bombing that happened this morning in a crowded area.
بعد أن طالتهم أيادي الإرهاب بتفجير أثيم وقع صباح هذا اليوم وسط حشد من الناس.
يعني شاب داير يتزوج.
A man about to get married at the courthouse was just martyred with his bride.
أثر الصدمة على المواطنين جعلتهم يختلفون.
The shock of the attack affected the eyewitnesses' recollection of the events. Some insisted it was an explosive belt, while others said it was a booby-trapped car. The area chosen by the terrorist to blow himself up, according to eyewitness accounts, was busy and crowded with people and patrons who are used to loitering around the place. The number of victims was high as a result.
كبيرا جدا.
8 were martyred and 46 were injured. They were patrons and unemployed. Some were here for a marriage certificate, unemployment benefits, and other things. They all come to do it at the court. The martyrs included 4 paralegals who were my colleagues, in addition to my friend who was a lawyer. There were also material damages to the businesses in the area.
In another development, armed men assassinated General Mahmoud Rida, who was in charge of the Mira area in the Ministry of Defense on his way to work. A medical source at Salahuddin Hospital announced that 16 unidentified bodies were found in the town of Salahuddin.
أعلن المتحدث باسم الجيش الأمريكي في العراق الجنرال ريك لينش في تصريح صحفي اليوم الخميس.
In a press conference today, a spokesman for the U.S. Army in Iraq, General Rick Lynch, said that the leader of Al-Qaeda in the land of the 2 rivers, the terrorist Abu Masab al-Zarqawi, is present in Baghdad or in nearby suburbs. The American general confirmed that Zarqawi is centered in Baghdad, and he said, "We will focus on him, and I believe he is somewhere between Baghdad and its nearby suburbs." The general added that it was just a matter of time before he is arrested. Lynch confirmed that his statements are made on the basis of documents that were obtained recently during 5 operations that were carried out in Yusufia, south of Baghdad. Since April 8, 31 foreign fighters have been killed. Among the documents obtained was an incomplete copy of the videotape that Zarqawi broadcast on the internet on April 25th. Today, the U.S. Army broadcast clips from this video that shows Zarqawi having trouble finding the trigger on his machine gun. The American general said that this video proves the hopelessness of Zarqawi, who will be devastated after the National Unity Government in Iraq is formed. According to the U.S. Army, 161 senior members from Al-Qaeda were either killed or arrested since January 2005. Among them were senior aides to Zarqawi, and 57 were regional officials.
و57 مسؤولا إقليميا.
The Yemeni Court of National Security has sentenced Mohammed Hamdi Al-Ahdal, known as Abu Asim, the Al-Qaeda's second man in Yemen, to 3 years and 1 month in prison. The suspect has already served 2 years and a half in prison, and he has only 7 months left. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office confirmed that it will appeal the court ruling. Adil Habib reports from Sana'a.
Yemeni courts, especially the criminal division or what is known as the Court of National Security, have witnessed an increase in the number of cases brought against terrorist suspects accused of being affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Some of the suspects were accused of carrying out armed operations in Yemen, including the prominent bombing attack on the U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer USS Cole in the Yemeni port of Aden in late 2000. Muhammad Hamdi Muhammad Sadiq Al-Ahdal, the Al-Qaeda's second man in Yemen, appeared today in the Court of National Security. Al-Ahdal was indicted on a number of charges, including the affiliation with an armed gang and the solicitation of more than 1,061,000 Saudi riyals. The money was spent on more than 300 Yemeni families who lost relatives in Afghanistan and Chechnya or who have relatives detained in Guantanamo Bay. Al-Ahdal and other suspects accused of harboring him appeared before a judge in a special criminal court that presides over cases of national security.
The court hereby sentences the first suspect, Mohammed Hamdi Mohammed Sadiq Al-Ahdal, to a prison term of 3 years and 1 month.
Al-Ahdal and his brother confirmed that they will not appeal the ruling, saying that God will be the judge of that.
Everyone, including the lawyers, knows that the court is illegitimate and illegal. We had no choice but to appear in this court and attend its sessions. Therefore, we had no choice but to accept the court ruling, and in God we trust.
We expected that the court would find him innocent because he is not guilty of any wrongdoing. The only thing he admitted doing was helping families of the martyrs and relatives of Yemeni detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
Al-Ahdal and Al-Zaidi's defense lawyer criticized the court ruling, saying that the sentence was not fair.
This ruling spared the Yemeni government an embarrassment, but justice was not served.
The court was held amidst heavy security presence and in the presence of a number of media outlets. According to observers, Al-Ahdal's failure to appeal the court ruling proves that he is guilty as charged and deserves this sentence. Adil Al-Habibi, Abu Dhabi Channel, Sana'a.
Consultations are underway regarding the Iranian nuclear portfolio before a UN Security Council meeting on the matter, which is to start Monday. The United States, Britain and France pressed ahead with a UN Security Council resolution demanding that Iran curb its nuclear ambitions and said they would push for target sanctions if it does not. But Russia, which has a veto power in the Council, on Wednesday made clear it would not support any sanctions or the new resolution without modification. The Western draft did not improve punitive measures.
From Washington, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose country helped draft the measure, said she still hoped for a diplomatic resolution. After her meeting with President George Bush, Merkel emphasized that it was crucial, if one wants to see this matter through to diplomatic success, to actually do this on a step-by-step basis. Iran maintains its activities are legal and peaceful. It recently even accelerated its piece of uranium enrichment, but remains far below levels needed to make an atomic bomb. One key provision in the legally binding resolution demands that Iran suspend enrichment-related and reprocessing activities, including research and development, as well as construction of a heavy water nuclear reactor. The draft resolution warned that the Security Council would consider such further measures as may be necessary to ensure compliance with this resolution, although further examination will be required should such additional steps be necessary. Such measures are part of the U.S. proposals for future sanctions and bound to be rejected by Russia, the only major power engaged in lucrative nuclear cooperation with Iran. Shortly after the text was distributed to the 15 Council members, China's UN ambassador expressed his disbelief that the draft as it stands now will produce good results. But Russia's new UN ambassador, Vitaly Churkin, said he hoped for a vote before foreign ministers of the United States, Britain, France, China, Russia and Germany meet in New York on Monday and Tuesday. Negotiations begin on Thursday. The resolution is under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which makes it mandatory under international law. It gives Iran another chance to comply prior to a deadline that has not yet been decided, but diplomats hoped it would be in early June. In its latest comments, Tehran said it would not give up its legitimate right to nuclear technology because of America's bullying and pressure.
As the Israeli parliament began a special session today to swear in the new four-party coalition government of Prime Minister-designate Ehud Olmert, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on Olmert to immediately resume peace negotiations. For his part, the French head of state, Jacques Chirac, continued his efforts to avoid imposing a financial crisis on the Palestinian government. The details in this report. Shimon Peres, an 82-year-old former premier and leading member of Olmert's new cabinet, opened the parliament session in the presence of Israeli President Moshe Katsav. Olmert's centrist Kadima emerged as the largest party in a general election on March 28th. Olmert is to outline the main policies of what will be Israel's 31st government. Parliament will then vote on the new 24-member cabinet, considered a mere formality, before the ministers are sworn in. As the incoming Israeli premier's new government was to be sworn by lawmakers, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas called on Olmert to immediately resume peace negotiations. In an interview with Israel's Mariv newspaper, Abbas insisted that the formation in March of a Palestinian government led by Hamas should not be an obstacle to peace talks, which are the remit of the president rather than the government. Although he believes that a negotiated settlement would be preferable, he has also made clear that he is prepared to go it alone. Former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres had said that Olmert was likely to meet with Abbas after returning from a summit with US President George W. Bush in Washington at the end of the month. Washington has called to tighten the financial aid belt to the Palestinians as long as Hamas does not turn to the peace process. But Paris was trying to tackle the situation. In his latest move, French President Jacques Chirac wrote to leaders of Israel and the Middle East Peace Quartet to ask them to back the creation of a World Bank account to channel aid to the Palestinians. Chirac said it was essential for the quartet members, the European Union, the United Nations, the United States and Russia to reach an agreement on the fund at their next meeting on May 9th. He warned a swift decision was needed to avoid serious destabilization in the Palestinian territories, which have been plunged into financial crisis by the suspension of EU and US aid to the Hamas-led government. To avoid financial meltdown in the territories, Chirac on Friday proposed creating a World Bank account to send payment directly to 160,000 Palestinian civil servants, thus bypassing the Hamas-led government.
And the word I'd choose to describe the Olmert-led government would be fragile. He has 67 members in his coalition, which gives him a majority of 7 in Knesset votes. But today, as we heard, Olmert made his convergence plan a top priority, and one coalition partner of his, Shas, attached a letter to its coalition agreement stating that they're not committed to supporting that plan. We know that Olmert intends to add United Torah Judaism with its 6 members and Meretz with its 5 to his government, and that will, of course, increase the size of the government even more. But Olmert really has no choice. He'd also like to make one last effort to include Avigdor Lieberman, but that seems highly unlikely at this stage. This is also what may be seen, Yochanan, as a rookie government. Olmert has rich and long experience in government and the Knesset, but not really at the center of the decision-making process. And the agenda which is drawn up for himself, and which is perhaps being dictated by events like the Iranian threat, is daunting in the extreme. Tzipi Livni, his foreign minister, widely respected and admired, is new to diplomacy, and Amir Peres, his defense minister, as we all know, is completely new to matters of defense. I think today in the Knesset, everybody there, including very probably Olmert himself, felt that they really missed the strong, almost monumental strength of Ariel Sharon, and of course all prayed for his returned health. Yochanan.
Leah, you used the word fragile. So what would you say the chances are that this government will live out its full term of 4 years and 8 months?
Well, I would say most observers are saying that the chances are not too good for this government. Avigdor Lieberman, who does have an axe to grind, is saying the government won't last more than 18 months. There are too many unknowns. All I can say is that for such an ambitious agenda, the government, so far at least, is flimsy, that is to say the least. But Olmert is smart and savvy, an experienced politician, as we said. Maybe an anti-hero, Yochanan, can succeed where superstars like Ehud Barak and Benjamin Netanyahu failed.
Some private citizens have introduced and seized public property and beach areas in the municipalities of Khan Yunis and Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip. These violations and intrusions on public property have stirred anger and outrage among local residents. With summer approaching, many local residents will not be able to visit and enjoy the beautiful beach of southern Gaza.
Prior to the arrival of summer, local residents in the southern Gaza Strip faced a bitter reality. Some private citizens intruded and seized public property and government land along the Gaza coast. They built random and scattered rest areas and summer cabins and tents. Beach rest areas in the southern Gaza Strip have been taken over by some private citizens who built summer cabins and tents in these areas. This new phenomena may thwart the success of planned future developments along the Gaza coast.
God willing, I would like to reassure local residents that we are working in conjunction with the Ministry of Interior, the Security Committee, and the national and Islamic blocs in the Palestinian territories, specifically in Rafah and Khan Yunis.
In this exceptional case, and according to paragraph 1 of Article 5 of the law of 1960, the Palestinian Civil Administrative Authority has the right to correct these violations.
These violations along the Gaza coast were committed due to absence of law enforcement agencies in charge of protecting public property and government land. Meanwhile, local residents expressed anger and frustration towards these unlawful intrusions.
I wish I can bring my family to the beach. There is no place to sit. I drove for miles trying to find an empty place on the beach. It looks as if I walked on the beach, I might be charged a fee.
No one accepts these blatant violations. As you can see, these unauthorized cabins block lifeguard posts. If someone drowns, lifeguards will not be able to see them. We condemn these intrusions.
What is the solution?
The solution is that these violators must be evicted.
Local municipalities, which are in charge of organizing beach rest areas, cautioned against the danger of these intrusions on government and public property. They summoned the help of the Palestinian Civil Legislative Authority to put an end to this intrusion and to stop sand theft by some people for construction purposes.
The City Council in Rafah has called on the concerned authority, including the Ministry of Interior, to put an end to these violations. Then we will open public rest areas on the beach for the enjoyment of all local residents. The City Council realizes the magnitude of this problem. Needless to say, public disorder and lawlessness have been on the rise in the Palestinian territories. However, the beach is an exceptional case because it is the only relief in the city.
The Palestinian Ministry of Interior must issue warnings and eviction notices advising violators that they have intruded on public property and they need to vacate the premises within 48 hours. All law enforcement agencies must then organize a campaign and correct these problems.
What makes things worse is that these violators were able to order water and electricity services to these unauthorized beach cabins and rest areas. In light of these violations, the average citizen will not be able to visit and enjoy the beach in the upcoming summer. However, the situation can be salvaged if the concerned authority acts quickly and corrects these violations and organizes beach rest areas.
شاطئ جنوب قطاع غزة محمد جودة تلفزيون فلسطين.
التقارير الدولية تدق ناقوس الخطر.
International reports have sounded the alarm bells regarding the future of free press and the freedom of expression in the world. Most of the reports shed light on violations committed against journalists and members of the media in many troubled parts of the world, where many reporters have lost their lives.
من هنا تبدأ المتاعب في مهنة المتاعب.
The profession of journalism is not an easy job to do, and reporting is not an easy task to accomplish. However, it is the honorable thing to do in this world, where many are trying to conceal the truth. Many journalists risk their lives trying to gather reports and collect images from the battlefields. The press voices world opinions and conveys the truth. Many journalists lost their lives in the line of duty trying to update us on world affairs.
تكون الحياة في غالب الأحيان ثمنا لذلك. ورغم أن حرية الصحافة هي
Free press and the freedom of expression are one of the main pillars in the protection of human rights. However, many violations and crimes have been committed against journalists and members of the media. According to a 2006 report by the Organization of Reporters Without Borders, the year 2005 was the darkest year in the history of journalism in terms of the number of reporters killed. Nearly 63 reporters were killed in 2005, and 13 journalists have been killed so far in 2006. Many journalists have been victims of violent crimes such as abductions, assassinations, arrests, and harassments. The Organization of Reporters Without Borders has made a list of the most dangerous places for journalists to be in. The American continent was ranked on the top of the list, and it was followed by the Middle East. Moreover, Iraq was listed as the most dangerous place for journalists. More than 87 journalists and 1 cameraman have been killed, and 38 others have been kidnapped since the beginning of the American occupation of Iraq. As long as journalists continue to convey the truth, the struggle will continue.
منذ بداية الاحتلال الأمريكي للعراق. لكن المعركة متواصلة ما دام
Independent media outlets have been increasingly gaining momentum in many parts of the world, such as India and Latin America. Free press is an important human right which will add to the success of this great world of information that has no national border limits.
Mauritania is celebrating World Press Freedom Day at a time when the international media scene is witnessing what is described as unprecedented freedom. However, the Mauritanian profession is said to be characterized by some frivolity due to incursion by some amateurs who brought the number of press permits to 460. But what is being produced on a regular basis can be counted on only one hand.
The Mauritanian independent press, in its 15th year, is living a period of adolescence, in a manner of speaking. Despite the limited experience and resources of Mauritanian's press, it has been able to uncover cases of corruption and government mismanagement. Newspapers paid a heavy price here in Mauritania through confiscation and bans. Journalists, for a variety of reasons, have been arrested and sent to prison. That said, some Mauritanian journalists have taken advantage of this noble profession for illegal monetary gains by ignoring moral journalist principles. Some put the onus on the government, who issued press permits to everyone who requested one.
There are more than 460 permits, and most of them were issued to illiterates who have no business being in journalism. Of course, this is with the exception of some journalists who can be counted on one hand.
Reporters Without Borders said that the Mauritanian government has shown some improvement in its treatment of journalists. To improve this sector, the United States established the National Democratic Institute in Mauritania, which is said to promote democratic principles in the press. The transitional Mauritanian government, for its part, has formed a committee to identify the challenges facing the press, find solutions by making new legislation, and creating effective regulatory institutions.
لأطر مؤسسية فاعلة.
كانت الحالة للصحافة مستقلة بموريتانيا يرضى لها.
The Mauritanian independent press was in very bad shape, but the reform movement undertaken by the new government will not exclude the press. This explains why the government has established a committee to evaluate the situation.
على دراسة الوضع.
وفضلا عن هذا وذاك.
On the top of everything, there is also financial shortage and limited readership. The lack of professionalism is among the biggest challenges facing the fledgling Mauritanian press. However, it still remains a major player in a transitional stage described as successful.
On World Press Freedom Day, we witnessed many scenes of Israeli occupation crimes committed in the Palestinian territories against journalists without considering the rights which are embedded in international human rights laws.
Discussions about freedom of the press have special meaning in Palestine. Here, there are major efforts being exerted, but not to promote freedom, rather to commit violations. The Israeli occupation is aware that the words and images of the media are like a bullet, so it silences the press and prevents pictures from speaking for themselves, because without a doubt, it will show the true face of the occupation.
Most of the violations against journalists are committed by the Israeli occupation. During the past 5 years under occupation, at least 18 Palestinian and foreign journalists have been killed. Dozens of others have been wounded by Israeli gunfire. Other major violations include the arresting of journalists and raiding press offices.
The Israeli occupation practice of committing violations against the press, including the killing of journalists, is part of an organized campaign to isolate the occupied Palestinian territories from the rest of the world and to cover up for its crimes against Palestinian civilians. International laws, which guarantee press freedoms, do not prevent aggression against the press here.
The major aggression perpetrated against me personally was when I was driving my car to cover the events at the Mintar crossing. My car had clear markings indicating that it was a press vehicle. Despite this, Israeli Apache helicopters shot 2 missiles at me. Many times I've been beaten, my camera has been broken, and I have been arrested and jailed.
The press office was hit, and this press building was completely destroyed. My journalist colleagues have had their offices bombed, or they have been shot at and targeted.
The Palestinian government confirmed the need to protect journalists from any violations, even if it happens domestically. In this case, the government will act in accordance to the law.
I confirm the social philosophy of respecting journalists. I confirm the commitment of the government towards Palestinian journalists and media professionals to protect them and provide a healthy and appropriate environment for them to do their work.
More than 8 journalists were martyred by Israeli gunfire. More than 400 journalists were beaten and shot at. Many journalists remain under arrest. All this is done to silence the Palestinian media so that it cannot speak about the Palestinian identity and the identity of those who kill them. However, their mission will continue. Journalists' rights of freedom and protection remains like many other rights, only on paper without being implemented on the ground. Journalists in Palestine need more than a pen, a paper, and a camera to cover the news. They need to be willing to put their lives on the line to report the truth. Israel Bahesi, El Alam, Gaza.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program is brought to you by Link TV, for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.